Hi everyone, good morning. Happy to see you, happy to moderate this panel. Before we start, I'm going to ask the panelists to briefly introduce themselves, tell us who you are and what you do.
Sure. Hi everyone, my name is Amy Van Arl. I work at EF Education First, which is a global company focused on language, cultural exchange, education, and travel. I am the Executive Vice President of Marketing and Communications, very much focused on branding, which for us also means employer brand. And I'm the executive sponsor for our DEI function as well.
Hello everyone, I'm Dan Figurski. I'm President of KinderCare for Employers. Those of you probably know KinderCare, the red schoolhouse buildings across the country. We have a division for employers where we partner with employers in providing child care benefits at those very centers or on-site at your place of employment.
Hi, I'm Dave Feynman. I work with PTC, which is a software company, global software company, making software for manufacturers. And I lead a workforce planning and people analytics team.
I'm Marissa Vargas and happy to be here with you all today. I work at Liberty Mutual Insurance, which obviously is an insurance company across the globe. And I am the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, our strategy and our operations and messaging.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Francisco, Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at State Street Corporation, a global financial services firm that does asset management and custody banking. So happy to be here with you all this morning.
Great. So let's get started. This question is for everyone. What are the best ways to build a purposeful and inclusive culture today in the workplace? What's needed? And I'll just, again, why don't we reverse order? Paul, why don't you start?
Thank you. I think, the first thing is to listen, right? Is to listen to your employees, to understand, what they need, what they want, what empowers them, what gets them engaged. For us, what our engagement sort of analytics are telling us is that our employees care about a few things. And among them are the wellness, right? The company's values and purposes and making sure that they align, knowing and understanding the strategy, our sort of inclusion, diversity, and equity sort of commitments, and as well as corporate citizenship. So those are sort of some indicators of what is important to employees. And so once you understand that, you can devise strategies and purposeful set of policies and or programs to get employees more interested and engaged. So for us, we listen to our employees. That's, I think, the number one key for us.
For us at Liberty Mutual Insurance, it's really important to really get clear with your purpose, right? To know what it is that you're really galvanizing your employees around. And for us, it's really about helping our customers embrace today and confidently pursue tomorrow. And that purpose for us is a noble purpose as we think about when people are most vulnerable and they have accidents or they're having a catastrophe that they need to recover from. So really having that clarity of our purpose helps us to galvanize our employees around it, as well as thinking about not only the clarity of your purpose, but also how you can bring that to life. And there is a lot of ties to diversity, equity, inclusion, and tying the diverse perspectives of your employees, and as well as the inclusion and the belonging. When you have a strong purpose, it helps your employees really feel that they're belonging to the company and doing their best work.
So at PTC, which the PTC actually is a legacy from Parametric Technology Corporation, which was our earlier name. But we have actually used it as the power to create, which is a motto that we really use around the organization. And it's really, when you think about creating, you're creating many different areas. It could be for employees, their opportunities, certainly for our customers, right? How do they create products and services that benefit their stakeholders as well as the environment, right? We also think about how do you create meaningful community in terms of giving back to the community, but also training that next generation of employee that's going to be coming in, right? And certainly it's other stakeholders that we have. So we really try to use that as the mantra that many of our programs come towards, and certainly we'll look at how can we also measure the success of that. But I think that's the first one, is that whole power to create.
My answer won't be dissimilar, I'm sure, to anyone else's. We do have a unique lens, though. I will say we have in our care every day about 180,000 children. And so we started with the work we do every day in a classroom with a child and thought of our purpose, our mission, our culture, and built from there. We felt like it was a bigger impact. That created a bigger impact for employees, for communities. And so we really started with the work we do every day and why the work we do is important. And that led us to children, and that led us to mission and culture and purpose and our work around DEI. And then how do we become influential, not just in our place of work, but in our communities and with children to a greater degree? And so that was the foundation we started building.
I would very much echo what Paul said about listening. Starting with listening is so important. And then I think also reflecting and communicating regularly. For us as an organization, and something that I really try to help with, is making sure we understand who we are. Self-awareness is such an important thing for leaders, and self-awareness is a really important thing for companies as well. So it's really going deep as leaders and acknowledging, what do we do well? Where do we need to improve? And so that listening should be feeding that loop as well. And we've really found at EF that a lot of transparency about that, and our journey has gone a long way. We can't always be perfect, but if we're communicating our progress, that really works well for us.
Right, right. It's interesting, I picked up a couple of words that each of you had said: wellness, corporate citizenship, create, clarity, community, culture, and self-awareness. Are we talking about alignment when it comes to staff and the company that you work with?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I think alignment is incredibly important. And alignment is never perfect. You never achieve perfect alignment. I think you go along the road, and you're constantly kind of coming together, coming apart, but that process of alignment should be a key area of focus.
Yeah, and I would just add, I totally align. I would say alignment at a senior level in leading by example is totally important on these topics specifically.
Yeah. You're nodding. Do you have anything to add, Dave?
Yeah, well, again, it's to your point about senior level engagement, and that's in everything that we do. So whether it's senior level sponsorship of employee resource groups, right, and making sure that they rotate, or it's also just in the in the interview process as we bring in more people. How do we show that we are an inclusive organization and demonstrate that and purpose driven?
Yeah. Marissa or Paul, did you want to add anything?
I would agree. I think that purpose is so important at Liberty that we actually have a chief purpose officer. So I think that kind of says a lot about how we're looking at it needing to be aligning and to be part of what we're doing, part of what we're saying externally, part of how we fulfill our company.
The only thing I would add is perhaps another word in front of alignment, which is engaged alignment, because you can be aligned, right? You can understand what your role is and what your job is and sort of go and do it, but are you really engaged and are you really empowered? And so I would just add, what we all are talking about is about alignment, but it's really about engaged alignment. And the other thing, I think Dave said it, which is around creating, but is co-creating, right? Is how do you get your employees to have a say as to how things are done, operated, acted upon, valued at the organization, and that is across the board, right? Hierarchically, you have to ensure that everyone has a voice, and that's really difficult to do, especially if you're in a very hierarchical, organization, and some of us who come from a different work generation, not understanding what it would take the younger generation to really be engaged and to listen and to go create with them.
Right. Well, that's sort of part of my next question. I'm curious about. There are different generations in the workplace now. I think there's about 5. So that has its challenges. And how does that differ in terms of cultural experiences and values of millennials and Gen Zs with the other generations? And what are some of the things that you're working on, or the challenges that you may have? I'm going to start with you, Dan.
No, thank you. So I will tell you, just for a little backdrop, we have about 30,000 educators in our organization. 90% of them are under the age of 28. So we have a very young workforce coming in and teaching children each day. I also will tell you from personal experience, I have 4 children. 3 have just graduated, now are in the workforce. It is a very different environment entering the workforce today and going for an interview. The folks we're interviewing, but I also use my personal experience here. My son, my daughter, my 2 sons and my daughter all ask about their plans, the company's culture, mission, purpose, belief system. They ask about DEI. I remember when I graduated college, I just wanted to know how much money I could make, and that was a job I wanted. Pay did not come up for them. As a matter of fact, I had to pry pay out of them when I talked to them about, so do you know what your offer is yet? And it was like, no, but this is a great company to work for. Their mission, value, culture, belief. Which means I'm going to have to work for a long, long time, because one got into social working, one got into education. But I say that joking, but sitting here over the age of 50, I will tell you it's a totally different world, a totally different world. I mean, I think if we do not adjust our hiring to meet the incoming talent, we'll miss it. We'll miss it entirely, because they're looking for a totally different experience than I was, or quite frankly, the generation before them was. It's just a different experience, and you have to have those things ready anymore. If you're an interviewer and you're talking to someone, if you don't know your mission, your belief, if you don't understand how DEI is working in your organization and that it's a journey, it cannot just be something you talk about, it actually has to be something you do. You might not hire the best talented person coming out of college, is what I would say.
So can I ask, just as a follow-up, especially the money part, and that people today, or younger people today, are not necessarily, that's not the first thing that comes in their mind from the experience that you just said. So what are the things that you think your company, and for all of your companies and organizations, how do you get, the best people or folks that you would want to have if money is not the riding force? I mean, it's important. So we live in Boston, so let's,
Yeah.
But what are some of the things that you can offer to them? Dave?
Yeah, I'll go. One of the areas that I think is so important for folks is also growth and development. And so, I know we're, following a conversation that was all about, L&D, and really it's about how they can add new skills and grow and develop as professionals in many different ways. And I think for us, especially, again, being a technology company, how do people build on that technology base for the most part? And so really, I think that's important. The other thing that we as employers have to be aware of is, look, my generation, I'm a boomer, and maybe a few others in the room, but if we changed a job early in our career, it was a red flag on our resume. Now I think as people, have the liberty to be able to change jobs much more frequently. And for us, we need to think about that talent mobility inside the organization. How can they move? How can they grow so that we keep that good talent?
Yeah. Marissa?
Yeah, I would agree. It's interesting you talk about talent. I think in terms of creating equity so that all generations can be moving and having that mobility, those equitable opportunities are so important. In addition to that, in insurance, we're not always seen as the most glamorous industry. And so as we think about attracting talent, right, we have to think about how can we really reach all different generations. And particularly, I think with Gen Zs you were asking about, they want to bring their whole selves. DEI needs to be real to them every day when they're coming to the company. And I think that another way is partially through the attraction and letting them know about our commitment, letting them know what we're doing every day. In addition to that, I feel like when they come, they get, particularly our ERGs, we have very active employer resource groups at Liberty Mutual. And that's just such a great way to cross generations, right? To be able to have different levels of employees and leaders and different generations and different ethnicities and more ability, et cetera. And I think that is one way too that we have seen that we can really engage the workforce overall and really kind of have that cross-pollination of ideas and innovation.
Right. So Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, for us, being a sort of blue chip, company, 230 plus years old, being agile, being able to sort of show our value proposition and sort of enhance our employee brand to compete with, right, the agile, tech-led, fintech, and those sort of more desirable type of companies has been sort of front and center for us. Again, right, clearly stated purpose, sort of values, your approaches to inclusion, diversity, and equity, them understanding or they having a sense of how just your systems are is actually really something that's come up really recently, right? And sort of talking about what are your promotional sort of policies? Do I have to wait around? Do I have to wait my turn? Do I have opportunities to grow and develop, as some of you have said, is really, really important. But just showing up with a refreshed view and look, I think it's really important. We are actually about to go through a rebranding process ourselves, so you'll see our new spanking sort of brand proposition. And for our employees, whenever we talk to potential employees, it's just being transparent about our industry, transparent about what their opportunities are, and transparent about how things kind of get done, and let them know that they will have a sense of purpose about work. I think it's really all that we all should be doing anyway.
Yeah. So within the DEI space, I wanted to ask you, Paul, how, I guess, the political landscape or external forces play into issues within the workplace.
What political landscape? What are you talking about? No, it's interesting because everyone wants to politicize DEI or ESG. It's not a political issue. It's not. And so what we try to do is stay focused on what matters and stay focused on what's relevant and what's important, and not pay attention necessarily to sort of that environment. Not that we don't have to pay attention. Obviously, we have to be aware and we have to sort of adjust accordingly. But the reality is, in order for us to be around for another 230 years, we have to think of this work as critical to our business. It's not a nice to have. It really is part of how we do business, part of how we win business. I've been in more client meetings, and in more conversations about the importance of this work and how this drives more innovation, creativity, outcomes. And this is real. It's not a nice to have or just a saying. And so for us, gaining market share, being a preferred partner, being a preferred employer, all has to do with how well we do this work and we integrate this work. And it's not going away. I can tell you, it's the forces out there will want it to go away. We want the conversation to not be as intentional. Obviously, the backlash has everything to do with the fact that you have a lot more vocalization of injustices nowadays, right? So you have, ever since 2020, specifically and especially, you see a lot of people just saying enough is enough. Like, come on, right? Why do we continue to sort of have a society that's not just, a society that's not inclusive, a society where some win and most lose? And so how do we make it more equitable for everybody, right? How we create an economy and we all capitalists, we all are in our organizations for the most part, to make sure that we have a way to put, food on the table and closing our backs. And so, but it has to be in a way that is also, I would say, impactful and for the greater good. And I think that we've lost a little bit of that, right? And now, again, because it is under attack from a political perspective, a lot of companies, those that really mean this work, will continue to do this work, and they will continue to invest in the work. Those have been kind of just paying lip service to us. You're starting to see, right, that they're shutting down their diversity programs. They're sort of, getting rid of their heads of diversity, or they're leaving, but right, because at the end of the day, they don't believe that this is important work. So I think, again, for me, we continue to be focused on what's important, and we continue to do the work as we need to, and because we need to and we have to.
So I have a follow-up question. What if you have employees that, maybe they want to go out to a protest or there's something within the company that they don't like. I mean, I'm thinking about, and I'm dating myself back in the day for apartheid, where, students wanted colleges to divest. So do you run in those type of issues that might come up within your companies? Amy, you
absolutely. All the time. I mean, at EF, we're not only multi-generational, we're also incredibly international. We have 52,000 colleagues working in, well over 100 different countries. We have our own physical presence in over 50 countries. So we get this on a global level as well as a US level. And I think that keeping a culture of open-mindedness, recognizing that the experience of reflecting, as we were talking about generations earlier, not just kind of making assumptions about each generation, but really questioning it and helping each other kind of look from the different points of view. I think in terms of the political things that staff want to participate in as well, incredibly important. That's part of bringing yourself to work. If we're saying bringing yourself to work, we can't ask you to check part of that at the door. So I think that, not always easy to navigate that, but incredibly important to be engaged in that dialogue with staff because it's part of who they are and it's part of what they care about.
I would agree 100% with everything. I think of things like not just protests, but heritage months that we might not celebrate or have days off. We say, bring your authentic self. And if that means that's a part of your authenticity, then bring it. And we find a way to accommodate it, quite frankly, or find a way to work with it. And there's not, I don't think there's a right answer. They're all difficult choices. It's not easy work when you think about it. But if you really believe, be transparent, bring your authentic self, tell us who you are, the whole person, then I think you have to accommodate the whole person. It has to be part of who you are as a culture and what you believe in.
Right. Dave?
I think back to the summer of 2020, not that I want to repeat it at all, but what it allowed us to do was open up conversations, right, that we might not have had previously. And I think we use that to build on, again, different interests that people might have. And one of the outputs for our organization, we're also instituting more volunteer days, so that employees have opportunities to be paid, but to volunteer in the community. And again, it's giving back, and some of it may be sponsored by the organization where you come together with colleagues, or some of it might be personal, desires and areas that you want to participate in, and supported again by a foundation that is also willing to match donations to go forward. So I think those are, some elements that, again, not only encourage the conversation, but are tangible ways that we can materialize.
Yeah. Marissa, did you want to add anything?
I would really plus one where you were going with that. We too have a strong community investments part of our company, and I think that's one way where employees can get involved throughout the year and really we call serve with liberty and volunteer for what's important for them, as well as thinking about climate resiliency and thinking about some of the top issues that we can do to really have to make our world even better.
Yeah. Do you find that some of your employees would or staff would come up with their own ideas? Would they say, "Oh, I want to do, I don't know, a volunteer day for X organization"?
Yeah, we do. So our employee resource groups have partnered for many years with our community investments. And part of that Serve with Liberty, there was a partnership where they said, hey, how can we have whatever community that we are volunteering in, can our employee resource groups really give some different ideas of where they think might be best to volunteer? And so there was a really nice kind of, you're talking about co-creation and synergy there. And so that's one way we've been able to have people, employees really raise what's important to them and also being able to give back.
I would just add that that's an example of a purposeful organization, the one that some of the best ideas around our involvement, our engagement, our corporate citizenship efforts have come from our employees, right? Employee networks, or CSPs as we used to call them, the community-based groups, sort of corporate citizenship groups that look at our investments. Our foundation most recently made the decision to sort of have some of the investments focus on social justice and racial equity issues globally. And that's at the behest and encouragement of a lot of our employees who, felt that we could do more in that space. And so, welcoming ideas, figuring out how do you funnel those ideas, because there are many of them, and oftentimes there's a lot of commonality in terms of the themes. It's a great forum. So we have those listening sessions, right, with our employee networks. We have 24 named employee networks, but with 110 different chapters around the globe. So it's 110 different really networks that you have to sort of listen to. And from a political standpoint perspective, we have it all. And so you also have to be able to say, right, how do we make sure that we take everyone's sort of thoughts and opinions as a whole person into account, and how do we deal with them to create an environment that is really equitable for all.
So this is to all of you. I mean, this is great hearing all of this, and I'm sure, for the audience, but how do you convey your values in order to attract people to come work for you, and not only work for you, but to stay?
Yeah, totally.
So Amy, I'll start with you.
Sure, yeah. I think for us, being really in tune with our values is key. And we've had about the same values for about 20 years. But we also have had a lot of change in that time. So we're kind of in a moment where we're really reflecting on those values. But I think it's really about storytelling. That's how we really try to make sure that we are conveying those values. Sure, we can state them. Sure, we can have lists of them. But we really try to focus on storytelling about what the experience is like working at EF. Whether that's on TikTok or LinkedIn or thought leadership pieces, wherever, how are we making sure that we're showing how you live the values at EF? So that's really been a key way we've tried to focus on expressing that.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I think it's how leadership, they show the value. They actually, I'll give a really quick example. We do not, as a company, have Juneteenth off. But me and some other senior executives took a group of teachers to Whitney Plantation and visited a plantation for a day, and sat and learned and shared photos and stories, and people who were local in the community helped us tour it. And I use it as an example of you have to show the value. I don't think you can just talk about it. I don't think you can just on your website somewhere. I think you have to live it and show the value, and that will come through in place here. They're searching for you or a part of your organization now.
Right. Dave?
I think there are a couple of ways. One way to attract new candidates is to go to those candidates. So for instance, one of the things that our talent acquisition group has done is really broadened our population in terms of the schools where we attract, especially for HBCUs and some other technical programs. And again, that's also part of a foundation, which is how do you really invest in education for STEM. That's important. The other thing that we did this year, which was a little bit different, is for our intern program. We have a very vibrant intern program for the summer, but the first interview that all these candidates had was not with the hiring manager. It was with someone who was actually testing, if you will, for value. And did they fit with the values? So I was one of these ambassadors, as were many other of my colleagues, and we really interviewed with that purpose. I didn't know anything about the content that some of the people were bringing, but I could tell if their experience and the way they came across was going to be, helping our purpose to go forward. And I think that was a really nice way to, again, broaden the idea of living PTC's values.
Yeah. Marissa?
Yeah, I love the idea of what everyone's sharing about living our values. For us, when we did our value kind of refresh, I want to say a few years ago, and part of that from a DEI perspective, we worked really closely with that team because DEI has to be inextricably linked with your values. And one of our values is be open to all people and all possibilities. That's just such a it's such a powerful value, and it really helps as we think about people bringing their whole selves, as we think about all the people in our workforce, all of our customers, and the diversity that they're bringing. In addition to that, really treating people with dignity and respect is a big core of one of our values as well. And that comes very much from what we've been doing with our DEI efforts over the years. And that helps employees when they're collaborating, right, to always go back to that core value, no matter what their thoughts may be or their perspectives, they're able to kind of bring those together and work through them.
Paul, did you want to add anything?
The only thing I would add that hasn't been added is actually, hiring managers play such a critical role in the process, and we often overlook because what they're testing for is the sort of technical skill set. But what gets lost in translation sometimes is, how are they ambassadors for culture? And so, if you don't invest a lot of time, so the front end of the process where our talent acquisitions team showing up in the right places, and attracting those candidates to come in and apply to our roles, and the ATS system doing its thing to sort of filter those candidates. But ultimately, when that candidate's in front of the hiring manager, we've lost a lot of, and a lot of our companies have lost a lot of great talent because that hiring manager is not able to translate, not the technical pieces of the work, the cultural pieces of what it's like to work in that team, right? What should someone expect? And so I would just encourage you all to think really creatively about how do you get your middle managers or your hiring managers, however you call them, the ones who really truly are the movers of the culture in the organization, right? They're the ones who make the hiring decisions. They're the ones, the reason for people either staying or leaving, right? And they're the ones who can really, on a daily basis, have the most opportunities to really inject your values. And I don't think that, for the most part, I've seen a lot of companies sort of invest in that really creatively. And so I would just ask us to inspect, in terms of the whole process, how do we do that better?
Okay. Dave, I have a question for you. At PTC, how are leaders deepening a sense of belonging from day one at the company? Are there any specific ways that PTC is leveraging its corporate values to attract and retain talent?
So one of the things that I would say from a belonging standpoint, and again, in addition to encouraging the people to, yes, be themselves, and that might be dress differently and join ERGs, join with others. But one of the elements, especially with people who work remote, is you're now invited into their household, right? Which we never knew before, right? And it was always kind of almost like a taboo conversation that you didn't want to get close. Where now you see kids and you see animals and you see family members. And so I think, to me, part of it is belonging that way, which is to embrace not only the employee but the family and what they're going through, and having empathy as a manager, right, and as a leader for those challenges that we might not have concentrated on previously. So I don't know if that addresses your question, but I think it's a way we try to instill, again, that being themselves and why that's important to us as an organization.
Right. Okay. All right. Our time is sort of getting short, but I just wanted to double check if anyone else wants to respond to that. Amy?
I was just going to say one quick addition to that. When we think about our brand personality, one of the aspects is being welcoming. And so we really think about that. We want to be the ones who say hello. We want to be the ones who are incredibly welcoming in everything that we do. So that's an example where I think you can kind of really take your brand and what your brand stands for and bring it into how you're thinking about belonging, how you're thinking about these topics. Because this point has been made a few times, but at EF, DEI is not a siloed thing that just some people think about. Our expectation is that everyone who works at EF, this is part of their job. So I would just build on that and say that's an example of how all of us can think about our brand and how it manifests in how we're treating people.
Right. Okay, great. So I have a question for all of you. Are there things that you've implemented in your company? I mean, all of you are leaders in your company, but things that you've implemented that you wish were available when you started out in your career. What lessons have you learned over the years that's helped you to implement and foster, again, an inclusive culture at your company? So, Paul?
Gosh, we've implemented a lot of things. And so the second part of your question was, what are some of those things that we wish we had when we were?
Yeah, when you were starting out, were there?
So, yeah, I mean, I relate a personal story as to when I first joined the workforce. My experience was I grew up in a different country. I came here and immediately was sort of welcomed into this community, this high school. I did high school here for 2 years. As a result, I ended up playing American football, which is a story in and of itself because I never played that. Ended up, playing in college and a little bit in the pros. My experience in terms of a sense of belonging, in terms of team, in terms of co-creating, and was just so impactful that when I went into the workforce, I wanted to feel the same sense of team, winning together. Even if we lose together, we lose as a team, collaboration, all those things that if you are a team sports person, you sort of feel. And so that was my sort of window that I went into, or my bias when I went into the workplace. And when I got to the workplace, unfortunately, that wasn't the case, right? And we had a training class of 72 folks. I literally was myself, the only man of color, and another woman who was of color as well, and that was it. And so that's just not acceptable nowadays, right? So I wish I had that, and I wish I had, and I ended up creating a platform where I spoke up and I said, why is that, right? And we didn't do any of the things that we take for granted today in terms of recruiting at HBCUs or HSIs, of being more intentional about, speaking about our values, et cetera. So I think some of the things that we've implemented at State Street from speak up lines and being able to sort of challenge, and be able to speak up and challenge, or, the sense of community that we've created throughout all of our not only employee networks, but other community-facing things that we do, and the learning opportunities, right? Because this work is it's not something that you all of a sudden become an expert. You can be passionate about it, but I make mistakes every day as a chief diversity officer. And so learning and development was something that I didn't necessarily have. I didn't have access to information, access to training opportunities. And so we want people to do that in a self-paced manner. We also do things that are some of which are required, right, because they're part of our values, and some of which are more voluntary in nature. And so, I think when you think of this, there's so many different things that you can do. I'm just proud that we've implemented a number of things that people really have mechanisms to speak up, mechanisms to have a sense of belonging, psychological safety, and all those things that are really truly important for us in order to maximize our productivity, right? And to have all the tools that we need. So, there are a bunch of things that I can mention, but they're trade secrets. So,
Yes.
Me?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
I not much to add, by the way. Wonderful story. What I would say is something I didn't have that I think we've tried to create as leaders at KinderCare is an environment where you can be wrong, where you might not understand every part of this DEI journey. I think you said I'm wrong every day on it. I think years ago, working, if I was wrong, you'd be punished or ridiculed. I think creating an environment where we can be open and transparent and be themselves and understand that, hey, we might not be right, and that's okay, because this is new to all of us, and understand that it's a journey, and meet people where they're at on that journey. And when you do that, you'll create an environment where people feel very open, and people feel like they can contribute, and they feel like they can have a voice. And I would say just don't do that at your corporate headquarters. Get in the field. I spend 90% of my time in classrooms with kids and families and teachers, and that's really where the work's being done in our business. And so I wish I had that environment when I was working.
Okay. Amy?
Sure, yeah. I think so many things. But when I think back to being a beginning manager, when I first started managing people, I think the assumption is oftentimes you're supposed to have all the answers, you're supposed to know what to do, you're supposed to look like you have it under control. And in actuality, you need a ton of help. You need to ask a lot of questions. And I think it's interesting, as you grow in leadership, oftentimes you lose that again. You lose that ability to say, I don't know all the answers. I have to listen. I need to continue to learn. And so one of the things at EF, we're huge proponents of Clifton strengths. You walk around and people will talk about their strengths, and I see a few fist bumps. Their strengths, but also their weaknesses. And so that is something I think that we've really consciously done at all levels to really understand ourselves, to have self-awareness of ourselves as a leadership group, and also to make sure that our managers have that as well, so that we continue that mindset of we always have something to learn. We always have the ability to grow. And so I think for everyone, if you have leaders in your organization that maybe are like not totally comfortable in this space, you know, one way to go about this is like to reorient it around, this is just about continuing to learn and grow and be the strongest leader that you can be, versus, oh, you need to say all the right things, you need to check all the right boxes, you need to do all the right initiatives. And so, you know, ultimately at EF, our purpose is to help people try to understand one another. So we're kind of lucky that our business, you know, meshes so nicely in this area, but that understanding really stretching to yourself as a leader and that self-awareness. I wish I had that when I was a starting manager, and I knew that part of my job was to like not know everything and ask for help and ask for guidance and ask for mentorship.
Great. Marissa?
Yeah, I'm thinking about one of the programs we have around inclusion called the Guidelines for Inclusion, and there's 9 guidelines. And what I found so powerful, if I would have had them earlier, is they really help you have inclusive, collaborative conversations with your colleagues. And that sounds so simple, but as you all know, right, you've probably been in a room with a colleague and you're having a different opinion and you're not sure quite the right language. They've given us at Liberty a way to have a common language and name things that may be happening in a meeting, right? That's when the work gets real, and you want to work with your colleagues, you want to produce the best product. And sometimes you're reaching for, what do I say? How do I do that? And one of the guidelines for me that I find most powerful is both and thinking, which is 2 things can be true at the same time. And that guideline has helped me so much because I can look at my colleague and think, okay, they're thinking at this perspective, and I'm looking at it this way. Can these both be true? How could they both coexist? What would a solution emerge from there? And that really opens a world of possibility. And I feel like, I think intuitively I knew it when I was younger, but I didn't know how to name it and to say it. And I just find that program so powerful, and that guideline in particular. I bring it now into my personal life for everything as well. So, you know, there's always that crossover. When something's working well at work and you can take it to your personal life, it's a good thing.
So you have the last word.
Great, thanks. I think what many of us have been talking about on this panel is the journey, right? It's the journey that our organizations are going through. And I think for me, when I think back to earlier in my career, it was checking a box, right? What have I done? Have I done it? You know, do I have a new bullet point on my resume or something along that line? Whereas now it's a much longer term perspective, right? And it's taking those steps, and it's taking the journey, but doing it together as a cohesive group. So I think in many respects, again, much of what we've talked about, but what we as an organization are trying to do. We'd love to think we have the answers. We've got many of them, but we don't have all of them. But we're working towards that end goal.
All right, so that's a good place to end. I thank all of you. Please give them a round of applause. Please do. Thank you so much.